not going to get out, but I got in. Chair's coming with me.
No, a couple. Maybe a little longer.
I might need something.
How are you?
All right. How are you? You look suspicious.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take just a moment of quiet for the sake of our
Thank you.
audio-visual equipment.
Valentine's.
We'll call the meeting to order. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Bigger, roll call, please.
Harrington.
Here.
Perkins.
Here.
Musgrave. Here. Brandon.
Here.
Kinnaman.
Here.
Kyer.
Here.
Delaney.
Here. We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under consent agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the Village Council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and discussed separately immediately after consent agenda approval in its normal sequence on the regular agenda. What is the pleasure of council?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second. Motion and support. Roll call vote, please.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public may address council once recognized by the chairperson. Comments are limited to a maximum of 4 minutes for items not on the agenda. Council may extend this time by up to an additional 4 minutes by a majority vote. For items on the agenda, comments may be made after council discussion prior to council vote. Prior to addressing council, members of the public will please state their name and address for the record. One thing I would like to bring to everyone's attention before we proceed to public comment is that it was brought to my attention immediately after the last meeting that I had inadvertently cut public comment short on an agenda item, and thank you very much to the gentleman who brought that to my attention. Certainly want to be sure that everyone who has something to say and desires to say something has the opportunity to do so, so I'm going to be very cautious about that in the future. With that, anyone for public comment? Yes, Ms. Blanchard.
Mary Blanchard, 3444 Old Creek Drive. And I would like to just comment to Councilwoman April Brandon and thank her for taking the initiative to look into the issues with the fish studies with PFAS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
I also am going to pass around this information. This is from the Citizen Work Group, the State MPART PFAS site. This was put together by our group, and it also gives information on PFAS and links to other organizations with more information.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Angela Wallace, 709 Baird Street. I just want to address a few concerns that I had about the last council meeting. I've always been able to handle the word no, and your no vote, Ms. Musgrave, I can respect, and I understand that. My concerns are with Mr. Perkins and Mr. Kinnaman's reasons for their no votes. Mr. Perkins, your statement of the children need you more than the planning commission, and I put that in quotes. So you voted no. That's not your decision to make. To infer that a woman only has the capability to work with children is completely misogynistic and is extremely biased. Mr. Kinnaman, your exact words to me were, quote, "but there is nobody else to do your job," end of quote. And my reply to you, and it still stands, and I will state it for the record, was, that is not my problem. My abilities to serve on the Planning Commission were not considered by you and by your vote. My job, the inconvenience that it was to fill my job, were my gender was profiled and my professional profile was overlooked. This represents a major concern. When women are brought to the council, they are looked at in an entirely different light than our male counterparts. Every female that Mr. Delaney has recommended for new appointments has been rejected by both Mr. Perkins and Mr. Kinnaman. This brings a question on if your personal feelings about gender roles are overshadowing your ability to appoint a qualified and capable female applicant. Are your personal conflicts with these females playing a role in your votes? When my colleague, Mr. Steele, a crossing guard who was also on the Planning Commission, was presented with this law that he cannot work for the village and be on Planning Commission, there was no unsolicited career advice to him. Nobody said to him that the children needed him, and nobody told him that this was a hard position to fill. Once again, you allow a male to make his decisions, but females are guided as if they don't have the ability to make our own decisions or have the capabilities to make them. According to our last census, the village is 51.83% female and 48.17% male. You, sirs, were voted in to represent 100% of this population. So if you can only represent 48.17%, you need to ask yourselves, are you capable of making decisions for that 100% of this village? I close with 2 quotas in a statement. It took me quite a long time to develop a voice, and now that I have it, I'm not going to be silent. And that was a quote from our Madeleine Albright, our first female Secretary of State. The second being, a woman belongs in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. And that was by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice of the United States. I agree with both of those statements. So as we consider yet another female appointment, I ask you to think about your motives and your biases. Are you voting on your personal beliefs, or are you going to vote on qualifications and abilities to lead our village in a forward motion?
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Anyone else for public comment? Ms. Barnes.
Good evening. Happy Valentine's Day. Joanna Barnes, 3393 Harrington Drive. I briefly want to speak about the ethics meeting that occurred. I spoke directly to Ms. Brandon and Ms. Kyer and Mr. Delaney about it, and I really appreciate the time that you guys gave me and how much you considered my concerns and that the proactiveness that you're taking on that. I didn't speak to the rest of the council. I mean, first of all, I'm not going to call you all at home. Second of all, I don't have access to all of you. And third, I felt that this would be more productive for me to get it kind of on the record, because one of the things that was really important that I think maybe people are overlooking is not everybody knows Carl Richter. Not everybody knows where every room is. So when you put up a sign that says in the conference room, and you don't put any direction as to where the conference room is, well, that can leave people like me spinning in circles wondering where that room could possibly be with no one to guide me as to how to get there. I missed the sign, so I didn't see it at all. And I'm actually kind of glad that I didn't, because I would have spent a lot of time looking for that conference room, and that probably would have been more upsetting to me than just going home and getting hold of people and being like, what happened? But again, I would urge the village strongly to utilize social media. I know that I can't demand it of you, but it is so simple to just put out a post that says, hey, we had to change the location, here's where it's going to be, and here's how you get there. And there's a social media post, and it's one more way that the public has to get access to this information that we should have access to, ready access to. We shouldn't be begging and clawing and scraping trying to get it. It should be at my fingertips. I did check the village website. Obviously, the meeting had changed too late for that to be updated. That's why we need something that we can update in real time, that we can see in real time. And most people get their news nowadays, folks, from social media. Most people get their up-to-date information from social media. It is very simple to designate somebody in the office to just put a post out. This is not a complicated issue. And we pay money for you guys to represent us. And one of the ways that we get representation is by getting information and that communication being readily available. So again, I would just urge that social media be utilized because it's free to the village. All you got to do is put a post out, tag it with Twitter, put it on whatever media platforms you decide. But then you can't say that you didn't at least put something out for the public in addition to a sign that somebody may or may not see. You just don't know. So that would be my only statement on that. I do appreciate the steps that are being taken to rectify to make sure this doesn't happen in the future. And I want to make sure that that's clear, that was made clear to me that it will be rectified in the future. The social media, I really think that's an important component in this. Thanks a lot for your time. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Is there anyone else for public comment? Yes, Ms. Mattson.
Anna Mattson, 15091 Western Valley. I'm going to turn the mood a little bit. I just want to take a moment to think about what happened at Michigan State yesterday. This is now the third school shooting in 5 years in Michigan. 5 years ago, I went to school at CMU where there was an active shooter on campus. I was due to be on campus, but thankfully got the call to shelter right before I left my house. The shooter was not found for about 36 hours. My husband still had to be at work in Mount Pleasant, where I had nothing to do but worry for his safety. I worried that at any second the shooter could walk in on him, and that could be it. Trauma comes in many forms. While many Michigan State students and staff did not get physically injured, there's no telling what this did to their mental health. If you know anyone who is on campus, check in on them. Not just today, not just tomorrow, but a week, month, and even a year from now. If you know anyone from Oxford, check in on them. Trauma has a way of resurfacing during these times. Parents, your kids may have big feelings right now. They don't always need someone to fix things. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. Chief Narsh, I want to take a moment to thank you, and please send my thanks to your staff. The work you do to keep our children safe and heard is not something we take lightly. Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mattson. Is there anyone else for public comment? Hearing none, seeing none, we will move on to the public hearing regarding the Holly Mill Pond Special Assessment District. Mr. Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and Council. Today is the date and time set for a public hearing on nuisance weed treatment on the Holly Mill Pond. This is something that we do every year, typically in the month of February, and this time is set forth in order to receive comment from the public. So if there's anybody in the public that would have comment, this would be the appropriate time to make that. And then this actually is an agenda item, new business item number 4 that council will be asked to take action on later in the meeting.
All right. I've been advised that we need a motion and support and then a roll call vote in order to enter into the public hearing. What is the pleasure of council?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Musgrave, support by Kinnaman. Miss Bigger, roll call, please.
Brandon,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Kinnaman,
Yes.
Kyer,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Musgrave,
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. We enter into the public hearing at 7:15. Mr. Clark.
Jim Clark, 314 Hadley Street. The short story is the special assessment district is working pretty well. But I would like to spend a couple minutes and inform everybody how we got to this point. Shortly before I moved to Holly in 1989, the village council had commissioned an engineering firm out of Grand Rapids to do an improvement feasibility study on Bush Lake, Bevins Lake, Simonson Lake, and the Holly Mill Pond. Of those, they had several recommendations for the mill pond since it's very shallow, although it does have a much greater flow of water going through it. The village council at that time, and the village president was Ardith Reagan, who coincidentally was an environmentalist. Can you believe that? Anyway, they decided to do weed harvesting at the village's expense for 2 years. In the meantime, I moved in. I enjoyed the mill pond looking good and being healthy. After 2 years, they quit, and we had weather conditions that caused a massive fish kill. We had a mat of dying weeds on the surface of the pond, sucking the oxygen out. Thousands of fish died, and as a miracle, hundreds of seagulls came to Holly to feed on the dead fish. Living on the pond, the smell was equivalent to being the back alley behind a fish market. It was an unhealthy situation. We looked into it. We looked at that feasibility study, and they had talked about setting up a lake board. I didn't like that because basically you relinquish control to the Drain Commission. You could talk to the people on Bush Lake, how happy they are with their lake board. So what we did was pass a petition, have property owners sign it, went to the village council, asked them to set up a special assessment district. We negotiated a situation where everybody in the village, including the village owns property there, would pay by the frontage foot for weed control. That worked well for a couple years, and the village council sent me to Michigan State for 2 days for a conference on small lake and pond management. At that time, I found out that the weed harvesting we were doing actually spread invasive weeds and was detrimental, and the most effective route was chemical treatment. After I came back, we switched from weed harvesting to chemical treatment, and lo and behold, we're lucky enough now to have Aquaweed be one of the property owners on the mill pond, and they've had the contract for the last several years and done a very good job keeping the pond healthy and avoiding fish kills, low oxygen levels, and any other things that were bad. In addition to the chemical treatment, every winter we do a drawdown. A drawdown serves 3 purposes. Holly owns the dam and the embankment. It gives them an opportunity to do some maintenance work there with the lower water level. It also tends to compact the sediment on the bottom of the pond. The pond's been there for almost 180 years, silting in. So there is some stuff to be compacted on the bottom. And also, since I have a dock and water frontage, when the water level is lowered, I go out and clean out around my dock and my water frontage. I think what we're doing on the pond should continue. The only person I've ever heard in the last 20 years or so that did not like it was a woman that owned the factory at the end of Hadley Street. She saw no benefit from it, but she subsequently sold the building. So, yes, our partnership works well. My share generally is $200 to $500 for weed control. And I don't say anything negative about that, and I would hope we could
Thank you, Mr.
continue
Clark.
this partnership in the future.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else for comment as part of the public hearing? Hearing none, seeing none, we will need another motion in support and roll call vote to enter back into, to enter out of our public hearing.
I move to end public hearing.
Support.
Right, motion by Kinnaman, support by Musgrave to enter out of the public hearing. Roll call vote, please.
Brandon.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion
One more
carries.
thing should be added as 721.
All the time.
Oh, yes. We enter out, we close the public hearing at 7:21. Thank you. There is no old business. Item number 1 under new business, consideration of discussion to authorize a proclamation to be prepared for the posthumous induction of Laura Legant into the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame. Mr. Walker.
Yes, you introduced that correctly, of course. And Mr. Joe Mishler is here to make a brief presentation to council. And actually, Mr. Mishler, I believe, is the originator of this proposal.
Very good. Mr. Mishler, the floor is yours.
Joe Mishler, 620 Academy Road. This idea came to me, I don't know, I was in 5 or 6 different places last week and the week before, and people said, we ought to do this, we ought to do this, we ought to do that, we ought to do this, so on and so on. And finally, I went home and I thought about it, and I thought, okay, what would really work? Now, I'm going to give you just a tad bit of history so you know where I'm coming from. Back in the 90s, my then wife, and a group of women got together and nominated somebody for the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame. And they were accepted. And they held this huge dinner, and they did all kinds of stuff, and now that woman is enshrined in the Hall of Fame. And her claim to fame, and I know you're going to see, this is going to sound really funny, but she was a war protester. Had a great deal of influence on a lot of people, not only with the spoken word, but with her actions. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything that they did, but on the other hand, okay, I see where they were coming from. And that's a stretch for me being a soldier. So I Googled Michigan Women's Hall of Fame, and there's a whole website. I gave you 2 pages, but I gave you the most important pages, and that is, what are the requirements? And I was looking down through here, and I started to make notes, and I thought, just on the surface, without even going into any kind of depth, Laura Legant qualifies for this. And I thought, why not somebody from Holly? Why has it always got to be Detroit or Ann Arbor or Grand Rapids? Why not Holly? Why not pick somebody who really had an impact on a variety of different levels in our community? And when I say community, her impact is greater than just the village of Holly or Holly Township. It's greater than that, because when you look at just let's take one little thing. If you look at youth theater, those kids came from all over. And those kids stayed in the program for a long time. And a lot of them have gone on to do theater. They went to high school, and now some of them in college, and they're doing theater. So that is the kind of impact that you're looking at. And when I think about the store that she had downtown, the inspirations, I thought, yeah, okay. How many people went in there and didn't know how to paint a thing and walked out having painted something? I mean, that sounds kind of simple, but really it isn't. It's someone saying, you can do this. Here, let me show you how to do this. And I know that when the high school theater job came up, I went to Laura and I said, you can do this. And she looked at me kind of strangely. Well, they might not pick me. Well, I wrote a letter and said, I'm retiring, and we need somebody. And that's sort of how it worked out. And so there's impact on a lot of different levels. And I'm not even touching this, I'm just staying on the surface. So I'm suggesting that we make this a community project. I'm not suggesting this, I don't want to be a one-person committee. If people want to be on a committee and they want to help out, because this is going to take a lot of writing and a lot of thinking. And I looked at their website. They haven't set a date for 2023 applications yet, unless they just did it today. So, but if you look down through here, that'd be cut off. Okay, anyway, if you look down through here, there's a lot of different things, and one of the things that it calls for is documentation. Okay, documentation can be anything. It can be a letter, it can be a proclamation, it can be anything like that. And you have to have, I don't know, they give you a recommended number of different things that you have to have, but I always feel the more the merrier. And what better way to do it than have it come from the village of Holly? I'm going to be going to the school district. I'm going to go over to the township. I'm going to hit everybody so that we can make this a community thing. And let's honor somebody from Holly, and let's do something really positive. You can see a lot of negative things, but this would be a very positive thing. So I'm asking you to consider doing a proclamation. And I'd be willing to sit down and with anybody. And this meeting kind of came up kind of fast, so I haven't really had a chance to even talk to anybody from the family yet. So, but that's where we're at. If you got any questions, I'll be happy to maybe answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Mishler?
No, but I'd like to make the motion that we definitely get behind this proclamation to posthumous induction of Laura Leggett into Michigan Women's Hall of Fame.
Support.
And I'll support.
Motion by Perkins, support by Musgrave. Is there any council discussion desired?
I would be willing to help.
Okay.
And thank you for taking the first step.
I believe in supporting positive things.
And this is.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mishler.
Thank you, Mr. Mishler.
You might want to vote.
Is there, yes, we will. Is there any public comment desired on that agenda item?
Mr. President?
Yes.
So I think Mr. Cullis probably starting to raise his hand too, but I just wanted to acknowledge the Legant family in the audience, for those of you that don't know, her husband Steve, mother, and children. And so, I mean, Laura really was a treasure to the community, and I know that we all know that because we worked with her very closely. But those in the audience who didn't know her or tuning in via YouTube, I mean, she was a treasure to the community. And I just wanted to acknowledge to the family just how much she really is and was appreciated for what she meant to Holly.
Is there any public comment desired? Mr. Cullis.
So, George Cullis, 601 East Maple Street. So I concur with Mr. Mishler, this is an excellent idea. Laura's effect on this community goes even beyond the theater and the children she did. Her battle with this disease that took her way too early. What a display of courage and dignity. One day she was having chemo, the next day she was downtown dressed in a dress and part of an event. And then the next day she was down. Then the next day she was on a plane and she went and visited somewhere. And she came back. The courage that this woman displayed was an example for all of us. I know at the funeral home, I talked with her husband, Steve, and I just want to add, along with this honor that we want to bestow on her, we are going to be putting together a scholarship fund in her name as well. We're in the planning stages of that, but it will be coming. So
Wonderful.
I wanted to give my support, and I want to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cullis. Anyone else for public comment on this item? Hearing none, seeing none, we do have a motion and support. Ms. Bigger, roll call, please.
Harrington.
Yes.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Number 2, under new business, consideration of the approval of Resolution 2023-012, confirming the village president's appointment of Shannon Cole to the Village of Holly Parks Commission. Miss Cole was, at this time, the only applicant for the Parks Commission, but she is an extremely well qualified and highly recommended applicant. She was unfortunately not able to be here this evening. However, she did send me a communication that she wished that I would read. She says, I would like to introduce myself to the council. My name is Shannon Cole. I have been a resident of the village since 2005. It is my home. My family and I love our small town. Currently, I serve on the Holly Township Library Board. It has been an honor to serve our community. In fact, I have enjoyed the work of serving so much, I have volunteered to throw my hat into the ring to serve on the Parks Board. Libraries, parks, and recreation, in my opinion, are part of the heart of our community. We once had a slogan here that was, "Up North in Oakland County," and I have always thought that was so true. We are lucky to live in an area that is rich in natural beauty. If I am appointed to this position, I would like to help look into creative funding opportunities to enrich the parks that we have, be open to, and foster resident collaboration, and to look strategically to what our parks can become in the future. I want to thank the interview team of Mr. Walker and Mr. Clausen. It was a pleasure to meet you both. I would also like to thank the council for the opportunity. I apologize for not being able to be present tonight. If I could offer any more information on myself and my background, I would gladly do so. Thank you all for your time. We will have council discussion on that item if desired, but first we need a motion and support.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Musgrave. I think Mr. Perkins had it first.
I think you got it.
Motion by Musgrave, support by Perkins. Any council discussion desired?
If you don't mind. Shannon sits on the Holly Township Library Board with me as a trustee, and she's been nothing short of exceptional in her role, and she researches, she's proactive. She had a lot of input as we've been actively researching which strategic planning company to go with over the course of the last few months, and you couldn't come up with a better candidate.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion desired? Is there any public comment desired on that? Yes, Ms. Watt.
Kristen Watt, 102 South Burst Street, number 3. This is very unusual because there's multiple library board members here. Mr. Mishler's here. I'm a trustee on the library board. I did not know Shannon Cole very well. Actually, I didn't know her at all until we had an opening on our board, and we had solicited applicants for interest through the community. I met her at that interview. That is where our relationship began. That wasn't that long ago. And it was a very difficult thing because we had, I think, 11 applicants, which was great to have that much interest because our library is wonderful. But it was really nice to see who came out of the woodworks. And she is a librarian for children. And she also runs their entire IT department for Clarkston Schools. Like, I was just blown away by her interview. And we ultimately, and I think unanimously, voted to appoint her to the library board. She had mentioned during her interview that if she had not been chosen, that her interest was parks. She's passionate about parks. And I believe she lives right here across from KRC, so the outdoors are a thing. So I really just wanted to offer that. I know she did want to be here tonight. But as someone that I didn't really know quite well, I have come to deeply respect her ability and her background in looking for creative funding opportunities, number one, and grants and strategic planning and things like that. And I think Sarah McCanney and others on our Parks Commission desperately want and need and appreciate new blood. We need people to volunteer. We need more people to, come in and help find funding, I think, that isn't always on the taxpayer dime and look for grants. And I can't endorse her enough in just some of that creative thinking. And so I just wanted to share that, my opinion of getting to know her over the last couple months as a colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watt. Mr. Mishler.
Okay.
It works.
Joe Mishler, 620 Academy Road. I just want to say that Shannon is a good choice. I've gotten to know her on the library board. She's very knowledgeable. She's very skilled. She's got multiple background in terms of all that kind of stuff. And I think she would be an ideal candidate or ideal member of the Parks Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comment on this item? Yes, Ms. Barnes.
Joanna Barnes, 3393 Harrington Drive. I haven't had the pleasure of really getting to know Ms. Cole. I've met her. I have had the pleasure of volunteering at many of our parks, and we need people that are passionate about our parks. We don't have a great budget, and we rely a lot on community support. And we need somebody that's a creative thinker. We need somebody that can draw people together. We need somebody that can look for creative resources for funding. A lot of the boxes that we need just got ticked off just in, public comment from people that kind of come from all sides of the aisle in this respect. So this definitely isn't a partisan candidate. This is definitely somebody that seems like they are kind of well-rounded in the community, and I just think that she sounds like a really good choice. So I would appreciate a yes vote from as many of you as feel comfortable doing so. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Is there anyone else for public comment on this item? So we have a motion and support. Ms. Bigger, roll call, please.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Item number 3 under new business, consideration of the approval of Resolution 2023-013, confirming the village president's appointment of Sherilyn Everly to the Village of Holly Planning Commission. We actually had 2 applicants for this position, both of them, in my opinion, very much qualified. In making my selection, a deciding factor for me was certainly the depth of Miss Everly's experience, both professional experience and experience in the community, and I'm sure that most of us, if not all of us, are very well familiar with that experience. At this point, a motion and support would be in order.
I will make the motion to approve Sherlyn Everly to the Holly Planning Commission.
A second.
Motion by Kyer, second by Brandon, to approve the appointment of Sherilyn Everly to the Village Planning Commission. Is there any council discussion desired on that?
Yes.
Ms. Brandon?
The review committee ranked both Sherilyn Everly and Angela Wallace as qualified, and Ryan Matson as highly qualified for Planning Commission. It is my understanding that it is presidential privilege to choose the appointment for the council to vote on, no matter what the evaluation from the interviewers may be. You opted against Matson last time and selected Wallace. This time you opted against Matson again and nominated Everly, whom several members of this council have spoken against when you previously nominated her for council. I will support nominations of qualified candidates by the president, and unless I am given evidence to the contrary, I see Sherilyn Everly as qualified. So does the review committee. This position needs to be filled. I don't care who likes who and who doesn't. I believe everyone here to be an adult that can work together as a team, and we do need to move on to other matters. I'd also like to point out that if she had been appointed to council when nominated as a qualified candidate, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. This is me being transparent about how I decide my vote, and I hope you will reciprocate. This is your fourth nomination since taking office, where you could have solicited public interest, and you chose not to. I find this conducive to in-crowd participation, and I have repeatedly voiced my concerns to you. While the candidates you're selecting are qualified, and I see no reason to vote against them, I find this habit to be potentially perceived as elitist, and Holly to be underserved. Our best resources are people, and you are not utilizing that resource effectively. We have 6,000 village residents, but I keep seeing the same names on the agenda. The Township Library Board solicited letters of interest from the public, and we had so many qualified candidates apply, the hard part was ruling anyone out. The village has other seats opening up, and hardly any interested candidates to choose from. If you had solicited public interest from the start, all you'd have to do is figure out who fits best in which seat. What I would like you to address publicly, if you don't mind, is why you didn't solicit letters of interest from the public for this position, if you will solicit letters of interest for future open seats, and finally, what is your intent with the review committee? Will you continue utilizing their work hours while disregarding their evaluation analyses? Do you find them to be redundant and unnecessary? Or are they simply a tool to rule out unqualified candidates? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon. I think I'll address your last question first, if I may. My understanding has always been, and I believe Mr. Walker's as well, although I don't want to speak for him, that the interview committees, typically consisting of staff members, heads of department, Chief McGee, Chief Narsh, Mr. Watson, and so on, Mr. Clausen. The purpose of those committees is to vet candidates for appointments to boards and commissions. Not even so much to make a recommendation, right? So you're quite right to say that in this case, I was presented with two individuals who were deemed to be qualified according to the village's standards. And I simply had to choose between two qualified candidates. And as you and I have discussed previously, and I have gone back and forth a bit on whether to solicit names from the public, whatever form that might take, giving up a public notice or call for resumes or citizen participation forms. At this point, I'm very much leaning towards that. You mentioned how that had been used so effectively by the library board, and I certainly see the value in that. So that's where I am right now. I think there was one that I missed.
Your intent in the future with utilizing the review committee?
For the present, I intend to continue to use the review committee. I'm always very happy to read their reports on their interviews, and I think that continuing to utilize those committees in combination with soliciting letters of interest, resumes, citizen participation forms for future appointments, I think those two things could go very well together, and certainly has the potential to bring to light individuals with talent and passion that I may not personally have known previously, certainly.
Thank you.
Any other discussion desired by council?
I do. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why was, when this all came up with Angela and Mr. Madsen, why was he not allowed to make a presentation like Ms. Everly?
Because what was on the agenda was the nomination of the president, right? That's how this process works. The president chooses from... Very good, right? Now, had Mr. Madsen wished to make a public comment on that agenda item, he certainly would have been able to do so and would have been welcome to do so.
Was he offered that opportunity? Did he know that?
That I could not say. I could not say what Mr. Madsen knew or did not know.
Did you ask him?
Did I ask him what?
If he was interested in another position since he was overlooked the last time.
Oh, yes, I did actually. I did indeed. Mr. Madsen, being a qualified candidate, I offered him an appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and ultimately he declined that offer. But I would be very much open in future to nominating Mr. Madsen for a future appointment.
Why was he not offered the planning commission for this open position? Any opportunity?
Because it came down to two qualified candidates, one of whom has more history in the community and a professional resume and a CV of community service that is a mile long. And I know, Ms. Musgrave, how you value experience.
Yes, I do. I definitely.
And I would wonder why that experience is not valued in this situation.
Because I would be curious to know how many committees she served on and how long she stayed on the committees. And did she return to the committees? Or did she leave the committees?
I think we can certainly ask her about that. That would be appropriate.
I would like to know.
When it comes time for public comment, we can do that. Any further council discussion on this item?
So I
Yes, sir.
actually did some research on her previous service in or appointments. In 2015, she was appointed to the Parks Commission and only attended 2 meetings and ended up resigning and needing to be replaced. That's the only appointment that was given to me through a FOIA.
Okay. Any further council discussion desired before we move on to public comment? Is there any public comment desired? Ms. Everly.
Well, I am Sherilyn Everly from 314 Hadley Street, and yes, I was appointed to the Parks Commission in 2015. If memory serves me correctly, Ryan Blaisdick was the president at the time. I think Mr. Walker was fairly new to town, And Mr. Blazek took me out to lunch, and we talked about the Parks Commission, and I told him at the time that I was in between jobs. I was taking care of my mother, and if everything was running smoothly and it looked like it was going to go well, I had no problem, but I was not interested in being involved in any controversy at the time. He assured me that things were going well, and I accepted the position. I attended one meeting, I thought, but maybe it was two. And then the village council voted to dissolve the Parks Commission. You voted to dissolve the Parks Commission. So, after it was dissolved, I was asked if I would come back and put in another application and serve on the Parks Commission. I declined to do that because, first of all, I felt that I had not been talked to truthfully. You don't dissolve a Parks Commission in 2 months' time without having some planning ahead of it. And the second thing was, I thought that the way that those commissioners were treated was abominable, and I didn't want to be part of it. So, did I quit a dissolved Parks Commission? That will be for you to answer. If there's anything else, I'd be happy to explain. I do appreciate that Mr. Harrington called me today and we had a nice conversation. He asked me about my intentions, my hopes, my dreams, what I thought for the community. Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions for Ms. Everly?
I'm glad I could clear that up for you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Is there anyone else for public comment on this item? Yes, Mr. Cullis.
So this appointment is an interesting one because of the circumstances that came out of last month's meeting. And taking the names out of the appointments, all three of the names, just looking at the appointment itself, the question was raised at the last one whether or not an employee of the village could serve on boards and commissions. The village manager stepped up, and according to the MCL laws, he said yes, they can. And that was the attitude going forward. You opened public comment, one person got to speak, and the village's attorney stepped in. We pay him for his advice. And he brought up the fact that while the MCL says village employees can serve, the Planning Act, a separate act, within that act, it states that a village employee cannot serve. That was a game changer. At that point, the candidate's name that was up for nomination was questioned and made the decision to give up the job and stay with the Planning Commission. That was quite a debate that went around while questions were asked how that worked. Prior to all of that, the question was asked again about the committee that did the interviews, and one candidate was highly qualified and one was qualified. You then gave your reason why you picked one, and nobody knows better than I do. The buck stops here with the township supervisor, it stops with the village president. We ultimately get to make that appointment. And then it's the board's decision or the commission's decision whether to agree with us or not. Interestingly enough, and unfortunately, you went right on into the vote and the public comment was never readdressed. So the question of whether one candidate got to speak or not falls under the unfortunate circumstances that public comment was never revisited and we moved on without it. That being said, it's no secret that the commission in front of us that came in after the election was that of a divided board. And as leaders, I can tell you this community wants us to get along. They want us to work on compromise. They want us to get to that point. In that last meeting, when that information was brought forward, unfortunately, one resident went out and made the claim that, well, the village didn't care when it was a man, but now they care when it's a woman. I don't know that that's a fair statement. Mr. Walker said in both cases he thought it was okay. When we learned the new information from the attorney, that's what changed everything. And at that point, I know everybody in the room thought that paved the way for the second person to fill the next seat. And I know a lot of people were expecting that to happen. So all of a sudden, a third name appeared that wasn't involved in that, and it's the game changer. I bring that up because that's what the people see, that's what the residents see. They don't care about the division. They want it, they care about where our community goes and how we move forward. And as leaders, it's going to be up to you guys to find that compromise and get there.
Thank you, sir. Yes, is that Mr. Scheel in the back?
Ryan Shield, 320 LeGrand Street, Highland, Michigan. As far as the statement about the parks being dissolved and that, I was on that about that time in about 2015. I filled out the citizen participation form and I listed like historic parks, what have you. And at the time, the then president had let me know, or like called me, what have you, and said, or asked me if I was interested in serving on parks. I said, of course. So I went to I'd gone to the meetings, whatnot, just about every meeting. And at that time, I do not remember anything about there being dissolved, anything about anything mentioning about the dissolving of the parks, anything mentioning about that or anything of that sort. The parks went on as usual, and then from that point I ran for the council, got won, and then I tendered my resignation after my election to the council, and I think it was Jim, when he won president, had filled my seat, and I was then on the historic in Haya for council from then on. And then that was about all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Scheel. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, Ms. Watt.
(102) South First Street. I'm Kristen Watt, number 3. Sorry, that was out of order. I need some coffee. I just wanted to say a couple things. For the, I guess, 3 years that I have been actively, or maybe it's 2.5, 3, so there's no time anymore with COVID, that I have been actively participating and coming to council meetings, getting to know previous board members, you guys. We've had our fights, we've had our get-alongs, welcome to Holly, right? So here's the thing. I made a comment when Mr. Delaney was elected to the council in 2020, and I said to him, when I started really getting educated, and I love seeing more and more people getting educated and showing up and being involved in their community, and really kind of understanding these appointments and the election process and stuff. And I had made a comment to you back in 2020 that nobody in the community knows half of who these people are that are getting appointed. I said, I wish, and at the time it was President McKinney, I said, I wish he would, have people come forward or talk about it. Just because new people trying to get involved may not know people who've lived here forever. So I was glad to see this, I guess, process come a little more. It makes the meetings go longer. It's a little more exhausting. But I think that the people who tune in and watch, the people who take their hard-earned time to come here and participate in their local government, I think it's a good idea, as painful as it can be. However, I will say this. Because I've been coming to these meetings for so long, and at times I've been the loud one in the room, sometimes I'm the quiet one in the room, I have always tried to find common ground and work with people regardless. But when it comes to Miss Everly, I'd like to say this. The first time I ever saw her speak at a council meeting was probably 5 years ago. I came one time. and she had a hat on and a dress and was raising hell, and I was like, who is this lady? And I was actually inspired. I didn't know her. I just was like, I liked seeing somebody passionate about whatever it was they were talking about. And the thing is, I know that this last 4 or 5 months have been brutal for many people and many things, and people don't like people, and people don't like how people talk to people, and I'd really like to just see some, if it's possible, some humanity and forgiveness and moving on. That's hard to say, but I've had to do it for people who have been very ugly to me in this community, and now we work together. Miss Everly and I do not always, you may not believe this, we don't always agree on things. We didn't even always agree on this appointment. And I think it hurt her feelings that I wasn't supporting enough. But here's the thing. Whether you like her or not, whether you like her delivery or not, whether you think, and nobody did this 3 years ago. Nobody sat here and grilled people to death about, pull the minutes from 2015, figure out if the parks, I mean, it's real simple. We have records. But the thing is, she is experienced, and she is knowledgeable, and she's rough. But if you have that on a planning commission to get a cuss word done, then it can be used in a good way. And I would like to see everyone sing Kumbaya and move on. We've got things to do. But I do want to say this. She is a good person. She may not be for you. Some of y'all aren't for me. But we got to work together to make Holly better. And her experience absolutely should never be questioned in this role over anyone. She has been here. She knows a lot. She's absolutely qualified. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watt. Anyone else for public comment on this issue? Yes, Mr. Mattson.
Hello, everyone. Brian Mattson, 15091 Western Valley Drive. First off, thank you all for being my Valentine tonight. I appreciate it. I wanted to come before the council and introduce myself. Some of you may or may not know, or we all know now, that my name's been brought up, that I've been very interested in a seat on the Planning Commission. I initially applied last year, and I've been hopeful for an opportunity to serve on planning whenever it may arise. Since then, there have been 3 open seats, and I have not been afforded that opportunity, all while having been the highly recommended candidate after completing the vetting process that was recently put in place. Should the opportunity make itself available once again, I wanted everyone here to know who I am, that I'm an active, interested candidate, and my background. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice from Adrian College. My career took a different path where I was in retail management for well over a decade, managing various big box stores, including Kroger and Hobby Lobby, doing up to $20 million in sales a year. Most recently, I'm an operations manager for an ABA service provider, working with kiddos who have autism and helping manage their behaviors. My most relevant work experience, though, is that I'm a licensed realtor through the state of Michigan for the past 3 years. To obtain this license, one must complete an extensive state-approved education and a proctored exam. Once licensed, realtors have to do continuing education every year. This education includes topics such as investing, building codes, ethics policies, and client care. In my time in real estate, not only have I learned these valuable skills, but I have learned that creating relationships and people skills are key as well. I have had the pleasure of building relationships with developers, local investors, lenders, and past clients, all of which would love the opportunity to be in Oakland County, including Holly. I have a vision I feel is in line with that of our village. I hope to enrich and build our community while preserving our small town charm and history. To summarize that vision, 1, I think we need to uplift and promote our local small businesses, both on the north end and in our beautiful downtown. 2, focus on family-oriented and kids activities, as this has been a desire for the community continuously that they request. And 3, finally, to create more income for the village. As it was stated in a recent meeting, this was a need that will need to be met in the near future. I am no politician. I wanted to be appointed based on my experience and my character. I hope for the opportunity to serve my community, an opportunity where I can meet often with my fellow community members and the community, my fellow committee members and my community, all while best utilizing my skill set. I believe that opportunity to be on the Planning Commission. If you have any questions for me, I would love the opportunity to answer those for you at the appropriate time, whether here or elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any further public comment desired on this item? Yes, Ms. Barnes.
Joanna Barnes, 3393 Harrington Drive. I'm glad that I've gotten a chance to hear Mr. Mattson speak for himself. I know that he has come very highly recommended, and I certainly would have supported his nomination had he been put forward based on the qualifications. But the thing is that Ms. Sherilyn Everly is more than qualified herself. And when Kristen spoke about seeing her speak for the first time, that kind of struck me because that's kind of the exact same thing that happened to me. When I first saw Ms. Sherilyn Everly give a dressing down at the council that was needed. Whether you liked it or not, it was needed. It was one of those moments where I was like, who is this woman? I'd like to get to know her better. And I wonder how many of you took the opportunity to do that yourselves. Because I've heard a lot of advocacy for how much was Mr. Mattson called by Mr. Delaney, but how much was Ms. Sherilyn Everly reached out to by committee members, by council members. I think that both candidates should have been given the opportunity to speak to each of you, not just the interview committee. And I think that both candidates should be looked at on their merits. And right now, Ms. Everly is the one that's up for appointment. Whether his passion is with planning or not, that's not what he's been selected for. He was asked to be on CBA, and Mr. Mattson chose to turn that down, and that's his prerogative. If there's another opening that comes up, I would absolutely support him being put forward for that. He is more than qualified, it sounds like. But I don't understand why we keep running around in circles, chasing our tail, wasting time because some people don't like Miss Everly. She can be a good person and do a good job and still not be somebody that you like. I know because there are some people that have been on council that I have not liked, and I have still watched you do a good job. The same can be true for all of us in the public. And when you sit up on council, you are more transparent than you realize about what your preferences are. Certainly when you start grilling each other about why you did this or that. So it's good for the public to see that, but maybe just be aware that it's not as, there's clearly a splitting of the ways here. And as Mr. Mishler pointed out, we want you guys, or I think it was Mr. Cullis, we want you guys to get along. We absolutely do. However that works. You don't have to like each other, but you have to find a way to work together. And that means looking at these appointments based on their merits. And Miss Everly is more than qualified herself. Whether she was listed that way or not, there's never been a time where I haven't learned something from that woman. There's never been a time where she hasn't given me information that has made me stop and think. And if y'all spend some time getting to know her, I would bet that you would find the same thing would be true for you too. Those of you who do know her, I'm sure have experienced that yourself. So I would just urge this council to please take her nomination on its face, based on what your personal preference might be, and look at her qualifications and fill this seat, please. And then when the next position comes up, let's do the same thing. And let's just rinse and repeat over and over.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Is there anyone else for public comment on this item?
I think Anna was first.
Yes, Ms. Mattson, yeah.
Anna Mattson, 15091 Western Valley. Mr. Delaney, I'm concerned at this point that you're setting a precedent with every appointment you're making. The only criticism that you have of Mr. Mattson is that he has not served in this community as long as others. Is that going to be the precedent going forward? That we only look at who served the community longer? Because I will tell you, me and my husband have been to almost every single Holly event and we have never seen you before. We only see you in this room. So to say that he doesn't participate in Holly, I question if you participate in Holly. Do you know the citizens you govern? Do you? Because we never see you. We just had the grand reopening for the first business back since the fire. That was a big deal. Everyone came but you. I will say other board members didn't come either. I will say Kinnaman, it's kind of his job to show up to these. But even representatives came. Lisa McLean's assistant came to this grand reopening. The news was there live. Where were you? He was there. He goes to these events. He's always around, and we've never seen you before. So if that's going to be the precedent, then I question why you're here.
Thank you, Ms. Mattson. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, Ms. Wallace.
I would like to, Angela Wallace, 709 Baird Street. I would like to remind council, and several of you were not on council at the time, but when Mr. Bishna was new to our community and he had put in a citizen participation form to be on the DDA board. And it was said, and I very plainly remember, it was from Ms. Musgrave, that experience counts. Being here, being time in our village counts. He was here for a year and a half, and therefore we should not put somebody on a committee or on a council that has only been here for a year and a half. Then it was brought that Linda from Battle Alley Coffee was. That was the meeting where Ms. Musgrave didn't know where Battle Alley Coffee was or who Linda was. So let's go back and revisit that. That was brought because they weren't here for very long. So this is not a precedent that Mr. Delaney has set. This is a precedent that the council before this has set, that people need to be here and know our community for longer than just a little while. So this isn't something that is just brand new. This is something that was set back probably, 3-4 years ago? Or longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. This is not the appropriate time to respond to public comment. Public comment is not the appropriate time to do that.
Then you need to take care of making sure that the statements are accurate. Because they weren't.
Is there anyone else for public comment? I just want to be sure, Mr. Shield, because you have spoken on this agenda item already. It could go on a very long time if we allowed members of the public to address council multiple times. Would we agree?
You only have your 4 minutes.
Yeah. Anyone else for public comment? Not on the same agenda item. Anyone else for public comment who has not already spoken on this item? We have a motion by Kyer, support by Brandon, to approve resolution 2023-013, confirming the village president's appointment of Sherilyn Everly to the Village of Holly Planning Commission. Ms. Bigger, roll call vote, please.
Kyer.
Yes.
Perkins.
No.
Musgrave.
No.
Brandon.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Kinnaman.
No.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Number 4, under new business, consideration of the approval of resolution 2023-009, authorizing the preparation of the 2023 special assessment roll for the treatment of weeds on the Holly Mill Pond. Mr. Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and Council. This is the item that we spoke about during a public hearing, and this is for the annual treatment of the mill pond for nuisance weeds. As Mr. Clark appropriately spoke, Aquaweed has performed this service for the village for a number of years and have done an excellent job, as well as being a property owner on the mill pond. The price that was bid by Aquaweed is $5,250. There's an additional $408 for a permit fee through Eagle for that treatment, for a total expense of $5,658, and that fee is then divided amongst the property owners along the mill pond by linear foot. And so what we have before you is approval of Resolution 2023-009, authorizing the preparation of the 2023 Special Assessment Roll for the total amount of $5,658.90.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. What is the pleasure of council?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Brandon, support by Kinnaman. Any council discussion desired on this item? Is there any public comment desired on this agenda item? Yes, Ms. Everly.
Cheryl Everly, 314 Hadley Street, and I just want to say one thing. If you like big birds, you need to get over to the mill pond, because with the drawdown, we are sandhill crane heaven. I've counted 50 in a flock, and every swan, from tundra swans to the trumpeters, are hanging out. I've counted as many as 20 out there, so get your binoculars out.
Thank you, Ms. Everly. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, hearing none, we have a motion and support. Ms. Bigger, roll call, please.
Perkins.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Item number 5 under new business, consideration of the approval for referral of toxicology findings summary and health recommendations for Bush and Rice Lakes and other relevant findings to the Environment Committee to make a recommendation to the Village Council. Ms. Brandon.
What a mouthful, huh? I received an email from local resident Mary Blanchard with an analysis attached from Dr. Brandon M. Armstrong, aquatic biology specialist from the Michigan Department of Environment. I called Dr. Armstrong. He said a couple citizens of Holly reached out to him, one being Mary Blanchard, with concerns about the PFAS and PFOAs, and he takes a couple cases a year from public request research. And here are his findings. From bluegill and bass fillets, the PFAs had an average of around 10 parts per billion. Surface water PFAs, 1.1 parts per trillion, and PFOAs, 2.4 parts per trillion. That was Bush Lake. And in Rice Lake, 10 bluegill fillet PFAs with an average of 7.3 parts per billion, and the surface water PFAs and PFOAs, none detected. Dr. Armstrong recommended I speak with Brandon Reed, a toxicologist from the Michigan Department of Health and Public Safety, about the impact of these findings and monthly fish consumption recommendations from these lakes. And here's what he had to say. Bush Lake, the water is safe for recreation. No recommendations are made. Same for Rice Lake. What does this mean? What are potential recommendations in waters with unsafe levels of contaminations? With some levels of contaminants in some bodies of water, a recommendation might say it's not safe for recreation, or it's not safe for swimming, or that's while it's safe to swim, you should rinse right after. Bush and Rice Lake surface water levels qualify as safe without further recommendations, though it's always recommended to rinse off if you swim through foam, as foam may have concentrated levels of kicked up contaminants. Recommended monthly consumption of fish is determined not only by PFAS, but by mercury and PCBs. The least restrictive recommendation is 16 servings a month, even in the best of conditions. The most restrictive would be 0. Based on PFAs alone, Bush Lake would be at 12 servings a month, but when you add in the mercury content, it brings the recommendations down to 1 serving a month. And the Bush Lake bluegill consumption, based on PFAS alone, would be 8 servings a month, but goes down to 4 servings a month when you include mercury content. And I want to point out all of this will be available in the meeting minutes on the village website. Based on PFAS in Rice Lake, bluegill consumption recommendations would be 12 a month, but the mercury content brings it down to 4. I asked Mr. Reed how the bluegill in Rice Lake have contamination if the surface water does not. He said the contaminants don't thrive in water, but they do in fish. The mercury content is in line with expectations for the lakes, and the mercury sources were likely closed off years ago based on the numbers. This is called legacy contamination. There's also atmospheric deposition from cars and factories which fall from the air into the water, contaminate the fish, or collect on the bottom of the lake to occasionally be kicked up. Fish also take on the contamination of the fish that they eat. The PFA findings were a bit high for these types of lakes. That indicates there's a source nearby contaminating the water. Mr. Reed said all the data was collected in 2021. Guidelines are approved but will not be reflected online until spring of 2023. Included are some contact information to those gentlemen. And I want to say a thank you to Mary Blanchard, Stacy Taylor, and Denise Cantu, and whoever else called and requested the analyses. And thank you to the ladies for your tireless hours spent researching public health issues. Your concerns are relevant and your work is essential. I also want to thank Dr. Brandon Armstrong and Mr. Brandon Reed for their time and research, their interpretations and recommendations. I believe these recommendations are important to the public to be made aware of, and I hope the council sees fit to send this information to the Environmental Subcommittee to review so they may make a recommendation of appropriate action after considering physical signage, notices online, maybe asking Eagle or the state of Michigan to take appropriate responsibility. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon. At this point, a motion and support would be in order.
I will make a motion to refer this to the Environmental Committee for a further evaluation.
Motion by Kyer. Is there support? Support by Perkins. Is there any council discussion desired on this item? Okay. Is there any public comment desired on this item? Hearing none, seeing none. Ms. Bigger, roll call, please.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Tinneman.
Yes.
Kyle.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Number 6, under new business, consideration of the approval of budget study sessions.
Yes,
Mr.
thank you,
Walker.
Mr. President and Council. For the last several years, we have conducted budget workshop study sessions on Saturdays. I think that that has worked well for councils. It's something that we start at 9 o'clock in the morning typically and take whatever time is necessary for the assigned agenda item budgets for that day. Usually we're done somewhere between 12 and 1 o'clock. We have identified 2 specific dates that we are requesting that council would consider, and we have specific reason for requesting these dates. So we have had some pretty involved discussions with our partners at Plant Moran. Ms. Pam Hill, who you will recall gave the budget presentation, the audit presentation in front of council, very knowledgeable. We rely on her for a lot of information and updates and changes throughout the year. There have been significant changes over the past few years, and it's been a few years since Plant Moran has done any education or training with the council. Her first available date to work with the council is April the 29th, and so we would like to suggest that date to conduct that training with Ms. Hill. It will be for council and staff also, but of course it will be during an open meeting, a public meeting, and so anybody from the community is welcome to come, and in fact we encourage attendance for that. The second date is May the 6th, again, a Saturday. That is with Mr. Brian Kammiller. And some of you are familiar with Mr. Kammiller from past water and sewer rate studies that he has conducted with the village. So staff, we do annual water and sewer rate studies every year to determine what the appropriate rate should be for the next fiscal year. And so we do that every year, but every 5 or 6 years, we try to bring Plant Moran, well, we don't bring them at this point. We give them all our information, and they conduct an independent water and sewer rate study. And I think that it's really important to do it this year, not just because it's in the 5th year, but because we know that we have some big things to consider in the next couple of years as the current bond for the water and sewer systems are set to be paid off. Council is going to have some decisions to make, and so I think it's important that Mr. Kammiller shares some of that information with us and talks with us. And his first available date was May the 6th, following Ms. Hill's training and presentation. And we think it's important that it is sequenced in that order. Ms. Hill during conducting the basic foundation of municipal budgeting and why we do the things we do, followed up by Mr. Kammiller's in-depth study. By setting them at this time, or these dates and times, it will give them both time to prepare. I mean, they're working on our water and sewer rate study now, but I mean, it's very complicated and it takes time. It will give him time to do that. And even on these dates, we will not have final revenue and expenditure projections, our revenue from the states and from different places. So it's not like we're going real late in the process. We still won't even have complete information from the state at that time, but we will have enough information to make educated projections, and that's why we're requesting that. So that was a very lengthy discussion of this council action request, but that is the rationale, and we are asking for approval to set those dates.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. What is the pleasure of council?
I'll make that motion to accept those 2 dates.
Okay, motion by Kinnaman, support by Perkins to schedule budget study sessions for April 29th and May 6th, 2023 at 9 a.m. Is there any council discussion desired on that item?
Who's bringing the donuts?
Jerry usually brings donuts.
I will bring donuts.
Excellent.
Don't these have to be done on these days or somewhere around there so we can present this at the June meeting?
So budget adoption is the 4th week in June, but that will give us ample time in order to get input or changes from council, and we'll have final departmental budgets completed along with the education series from Plant Moran.
Any further council comment desired on this item? Any public comment desired on this item? Seeing none, hearing none, we have a motion and support. Ms. Bigger, roll
Mr.
call.
President?
Yes.
I think Mr.
Was there a
Cullis
hand?
was
Yes,
raising his
Mr.
hand.
Cullis, yes. Thank you.
Just a quick question for the village manager. You mentioned those bonds were coming up to be paid off. Do you have the dates on those 2? Because I know we had refinanced them several times over the years.
Yeah, so the last bond is scheduled to be paid off in 2026. It's not really a Q&A session, but there you go. I'm just kidding.
It's because people ask that all the time.
Any other public comment?
No, good point.
All right. Ms. Bigger, roll call vote, please.
Harrington.
Yes.
Kinnaman.
Yes.
Heyer.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Reports. Mr. Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I see my report that I included in your packet, I wrote just as I spoke this last time very long. I'll just call attention to the very last bullet, if I can. And it's just an observation, something that we first started talking about on a staff level. Thank you, Mr. Clausen. And then, but I thought was relevant and it's important to council. I think it's timely for council to consider. So we are a member of the Michigan Municipal League. Excellent organization. All of council receives their publication. Mr. Harrington, I think you're in the queue because you're new, but you will get it. I have a copy of it. I would just draw your attention to the January-February issue, and there are 2 articles in that are really relevant, not just for Holly, but for governments all across Michigan and the United States. One deals with council meetings are for municipal business, and I think that this helps remove division or partisanship or any of that, but it helps us conduct the business of the community. Number 2, it talks about the legalities of social media, and probably no time is more pertinent now than to consider what the legalities are regarding social media communications and how they interplay with the Open Meetings Act. And so I would just encourage that council takes a look at that, as well as the community. If anybody would like a copy of those 2 articles, I'd be happy to provide those. But I just think that they're really important, and they may even lead to some structural changes in the way that we all conduct meetings today to make them more meaningful to the community and more efficient. And I'd be happy to talk about those collectively with the council or individually if you'd have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. Mr. Gildner.
I have nothing tonight. Been rather
All
quiet.
right. Very good. Ms. Bigger.
Nothing to add to my written report.
Thank you. Board and commission updates and council comments. Ms. Kyer.
Yes, so we just filled a parks seat, but we have another one open, so if anybody's interested. We talked last month about kayak rentals, particularly kayak lockers, and we also talked about monitoring levels on the Shiawassee, which would help us, not only the kayakers that would use that river, but also in an event like storms, we would be able to warn residents who are near the river that it may overflow its banks. That was brought to us by Mr. Lossing, and I honestly, I'm all for it. We are also scheduling our park cleanup. We're going to go around next month, decide which park basically needs the most attention. We're also looking at grant opportunities. As far as ethics, as Ms. Barnes pointed out, we did have a little snafu with the scheduling last time. Hopefully we will get all those kinks worked out, and we have our second meeting next week. And that is all I have to report.
Thank you. Mr. Kinnaman.
The Planning Commission met and approved drawings for the Marathon Station at the corner of Grange Hall and Saginaw North Holly. That will include a lane, turn lane built in to turn south. It may take them up to a year to really fulfill this. We did approve it with several contingencies, and the reason that that we went ahead with this approval was because this approval was necessary before they could do about 15 other steps that are a lot of state and federal red tape to get new tanks ordered and things like that, that if this didn't get approved, then they were 2 years out, if at all. And so that was done. The Capital Improvement Committee met and listened to a couple of possibilities for new village office location, And sometime next week, we will be doing some site tours. In relation to ribbon cuttings, we did have a very good ribbon cutting, an exciting ribbon cutting for our community, with Creative Fashion being not necessarily the first business to reopen, but the first business to receive certificate of occupancy after being damaged by the fire. And that was a significant step for us as a community to say that we are well on the way to recovery from the devastations from June. As was mentioned, the others are in process. The hotel is getting their roof fixed, and somebody's report talks about that a little bit, that they will then be working on the interior. Andy's Place has pulled permits to put a roof on, and then they will begin work on the interior, which will be a steel structure basically built inside of the shell, the brick shell. And the property that was the arcade has been placed up for sale, and we'll see what develops from that. We do have another ribbon cutting coming up. March 1st, we will be doing a ribbon cutting for Monarch Home Design, which is the gray building at the corner of Saginaw and Elm Street. It's a business that kind of changed hands and restructured a little bit, and so we will be doing a new ribbon cutting for them. And sometime in March, I have about 3 or 4 more, so that are kind of lining up like planes coming in for landing. So we'll talk about those later. I would like to make a comment on Laura Legant's recommendation, and do find that to be a very positive thing. I worked extensively with Laura, and miss her. And I think this is very fitting for her. I would be happy to serve on that committee too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kinnaman. Ms. Brandon.
The president and I didn't agree on this meeting being held today. I've voiced my complaints a few times. I thought it could have been pushed out a week, and I figure most of our council and our staff are married. Their spouses might have wanted to go out. I think family harmony should come first, but you know, you're listening to me complain instead, you're welcome. My older son is home babysitting my littles tonight instead of out on a date, and I'm telling you this to highlight the fact that the decisions you make affect the council, the staff, and their family, and public service always comes with some sacrifice, and I hope that we'll minimize unnecessary sacrifice for public officials and our staff. We can best serve the public when our own needs are met. If any council or staff agrees with me, I invite you to make it known to the current or future presidents. I know Valentine's Day, it's not Christmas, it's a gray area, I get it. Moving on, no more complaints. At our last meeting, Mr. Roselle made a public comment regarding the need for fire suppression and prevention device installation in the Village of Holly. Mr. Roselle and I met to discuss this more in depth later that week. I think his idea has merit, could be a component not only to preserve the historic nature of our downtown, but also potentially minimize risks to our first responders. Mr. Roselle suggested that grant money might be available and mentioned creating a committee dedicated to seeking funding, and I hope he continues pursuing this issue. Mr. Feeney expressed some concerns surrounding signage at the Falk Road dump at our last meeting. Mr. Walker addressed the issue and said that signage is posted. Mr. Feeney and I spoke more in depth on the matter the following week, and he said some signage had fallen along with fencing. We agreed a ride along is a good idea. Mr. Walker went on one with other staff and took pictures, and hopefully he'll share his findings with us. And finally, at At our last meeting, I learned that the chief is not always required to read his report out loud, so I didn't get a chance to comment on something I found important and relevant. I would like to personally commend Chief Narsh for his exemplary service. Holly Police worked hand in hand with Holly area schools under the guidance of Milford's The North Group security consultants and successfully conducted active shooter training. North Group is a nationally renowned organization, and local military veteran Steve Hernandez is the CEO. Chief Narsh has again proven himself to have exceptional skill at identifying the best of the best and forging meaningful relationships for the village. The Village of Holly received these services free of charge. Police Chief Narsh, Fire Chief McGee, and North Group have extensive training scenarios lined up in the near future that include rescue and emergency medical response. Narsh is creatively utilizing resources available to him at no cost to our taxpayers to make certain our force continues proper training and education. So thank you, Chief Narsh, for excelling in your position. And thank you, Steve Hernandez, and please thank your staff at North Group for training Holly Police and doing so free of charge. And in light of tragic events yesterday at MSU, I want to extend my deepest condolences to the victims, their family and friends. My heart goes out to you.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon. Mr. Perkins.
HDC met, very minimal agenda items, but there was a local business brought forward to be put forward for an award. And MSU thing last night, just, I mean, I couldn't sleep last night. And what's going on in there in Ohio, my God, I mean, you know, with the train derailment. It's just a crazy world. That's all I have. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Musgrave.
Community development met. We discussed doing some touring, and we're waiting on some information back. And the other two groups that I am in have not met. And I do agree with you, Ms. Brandon, on the Valentine's and the holidays.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Harrington.
Yes, I would also like to throw my opinion in on Laura. I think that's a great idea. And I'd be happy to help, and my family would be happy to help. I met with Haya for the first time, and we have a budget, and I had a couple of questions, and I have answers for them that I'll be returning to them, and we'll go from there.
Very good. Thank you, sir. The Downtown Development Authority Board met last night. Just a couple of highlights from that meeting. As previously mentioned, well, in a different context, Mr. Dave Lossing of the Shiawassee River Water Trail Coalition presented also to the DDA board a device for monitoring water levels and water speed and such on the Shiawassee River. I think that could be of great benefit to our community, so I agree with Ms. Kyer on that, but no action has been taken by the board as yet. That was simply a presentation. And then we had a DDA board member resign, and so there will be an opening on the DDA board. As a reminder, the DDA board, with one exception of those 9 members of the board, is open to business owners in the DDA district. So I'd be very happy throwing it out there to whoever is watching to take letters of interest for that appointment. If there is nothing further, I will wish everyone a yes, sir. Mr. Cullis.
Take 60 seconds as the township supervisor for a public service announcement.
Yes, yes, sir.
I apologize. I should have done this in public comment, but Ms. Kyer, when you talked about the Shiawassee, you reminded me. We have a new boat launch or kayak launch that was put in off of Fish Lake. It is still surrounded by the yellow tapes. A lot of people have said, why isn't it open? It has passed all the state inspections. The only one that remains is the Water Resource Commission out of Oakland County. They won't allow us to open it until the grass is reaches 2 inches high. The reason for that is they move so much soil around that area. Their concern is soil erosion, and they need it to be secured. So I know a lot of people have asked. That's why it's closed, and it will remain until we accomplish that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Happy St. Valentine's Day to everyone. The meeting is adjourned.